personal responsibility got to come into play when it comes to finances?
Well, you'd always say that, but they were duped into doing mortgages. I used to give speeches of success. They'd ask me about success, and they pay me a lot of money. I give a lot of money to charity, and I feel guilty when I don't take it. And I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say, don't go for these. I used to call them exploding mortgages because that's what they were. They were exploding mortgages. And I was right. I have so many letters of people thanking me because they didn't do it. They didn't do the exploding mortgage where they're going to give you 150% of what you're asking for. You're going to move into the most beautiful house, like a house you can't afford, but like you've never seen before. And you don't have to pay interest the first year. Don't worry about it. So you have to blame everybody, but you have to blame government. You have to blame Wall Street. You have to blame the bankers in particular. And I think today, the bankers are a big problem because they're not loaning money. You know, they did get bailed out.
Well, not only they're not loaning money, but my anger to the bankers is that they seem to have learned nothing about how to behave in this crisis, in the sense that having been responsible, or certainly partly responsible, for bringing the country to its financial needs, when they get bailed out by the taxpayer, the first thing many of them have done is stick noses straight back in the bonus trough and give themselves millions of dollars again. They don't seem to get it. You work with these guys day in, day out. What do you think of that in particular?
Well, some of the banks are asking for fees just to keep your money. I mean, all of a sudden, you know, we're getting fees for keeping money, so I don't like that. I don't like a lot of the things that the bankers have done. I mean, you know, when you talk about the Occupy Wall Street protesters, I mean, they do have some points. And I'm a very conservative guy and I'm a Republican guy. Well, the biggest problem I have with what's happening with the system is the banks, unless you're like somebody like me, if I want to borrow money, I can borrow all the money I want. At the rates that are the lowest rates I've ever seen. That's because I don't need it. But if you need money, or if you want to buy a house in Phoenix, Arizona, you can't get it. You can't get any money. They'll give you a 25% loan, they'll give you a 30% loan, and they'll have you tied up like a sardine.
But they have the money, right?
They have the money. They have cash, and they're not using it.
What is the way to unlock this? I mean, you're one of the smartest business people I know. How do you get through this apparently immovable wall now, where the banks have the money but don't want to lend it, and the economy is just trapped in hell?
Part of the problem that the banks have, in all fairness, Piers. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the banks because I see what's happening. I'll sell apartments to people and then they tell me I can't get financing, Mr. Trump. I said, well, you got to get your financing. You know, it's like one of those things, or pay me cash. But people can't pay cash, most people. I think there are a lot of different problems with the banks, but one of the things is regulation. The regulators are making it so tough on banks. I called a couple of banks for friends of mine that were trying to buy something. And they said, Donald, the problem we have is the regulators are literally watching every line of every statement. And if we loan this guy money to build a building, or if we loan this one, you know, unless he puts up like 60 or 70% equity, which is ridiculous. That's not even a loan. So we can't give him the money. And they're telling me the regulators are literally running the banks. The banks are afraid, and really not even afraid. In some cases, they can't make the deal. So I don't know what the reason is. I think that's a big part of the reason. But I can tell you this. The banks have money. They're not loaning it, and especially to people that want to buy houses.
Is there more that Barack Obama can do as president to unlock this, to remove the paralysis?
You have to let the banks do their thing. You have to tell the regulators, look, some of the deals will be bad, but they have to do their thing. You know, not everything's going to be a AAA person with a perfect rating and much more money. You know, if you have a lot of money, they'll give you all the money you want. If you don't have that much money, they're not loaning. So I think if I were President Obama, I'd say, fellas, you got to ease up a little bit because they're not loaning the money to people to buy houses. Now, I tell this to people, friends of mine and other people and young people, and this is a great time to buy a house, but not from you or from me. This is a great time to buy a house from a bank. And you can get the money because they already own the house. They have no choice. They have to get rid of it because these houses are being vandalized. Well, people don't even realize. First of all, the group leaves and they hate the bank because they were forced out. So they vandalized the house. Then everybody else gets into the picture. The banks are desperate to sell houses. They're not desperate to loan money. But when they already have the house, they'll give you a purchase money mortgage. They'll take back financing. This is a great time to buy houses, but only from banks.
Did you agree with the bailing out of the banks after Lehman Brothers collapsed?
Well, I'll tell you this. Look, I'm a very conservative person, and I'm a Republican, but I watched banks that were the strongest banks in the nation, and I'm friendly with many of the heads of those banks, and those people were scared. They thought it was over. And I'm talking about Goldman Sachs. I'm talking about the biggest banks. These people thought it was over. There was going to be a run on every institution. And you can have the strongest bank in the world, but if there's a run on that bank, it's not strong because the numbers, it's a very simple leverage.
And what would have happened if Armageddon had happened and you had a domino effect? How bad would it have been? Because the counter argument is, well, they deserve to have a run on them.
You're right. You don't know how bad it would have been. And it may not have been as bad as I think, but I think it would have been very, very bad. Now, there are certain industries, when you talk about banks, you're talking about the entire financial system could have collapsed. When you talk about loaning money to, make solar panels, where it makes no sense, or loaning money to make cars in Finland, or loaning money, or not even loaning money, giving money to China, hundreds of millions of dollars a year to China, when they're in fact so rich and they're making trillions, we're losing trillions. That's a whole different thing. As far as the banks are concerned, you're talking about the financial system of this country, Piers. And I'll tell you what, I was there and I watched big, powerful bankers, arrogant guys that were hot stuff, guys that thought they'd go into a restaurant, they were the kings. And I watched them and they were like weak, poor, pathetic men. They really thought it was over. So, and they're smart. So when you say, did they do the right thing? And I know it's not popular in some circles, I think you probably had to do it.
Well, the argument from someone at Goldman Sachs would be, look, we were in the situation we were in. It was important we didn't go under. Yes, we got bailed out, but we paid it back. The taxpayer doesn't suffer. It's not an argument that resonates well at the Occupy Wall Street. What do you say to that?
Well, because they didn't really, when you think of it, they got very cheap money and they paid it back, but they're not loaning it out now. And don't forget, there was an argument that you save the banks, but you take over the banks. In other words, yes, we'll give money to Goldman Sachs, but we own it. And we'll keep the same money.
Should the government have done that?
Well, that was the other argument.
Then
in fact, I argued that.
They could be ordering them to release the money.
Well, no, I argued that. Frankly, you could have, you sell it as soon as things get normal. But shareholders came out rather well with the bailout. Now, usually when something bad happens, the shareholders get wiped out. Not necessarily the bondholders, but the shareholders get wiped out. So there was a question for a period of time. In fact, I know they were thinking about it, that if we're going to give Bank of America, billions and billions of dollars, or Citi, or almost all of the banks, but if we're going to give them money, congratulations, we own the bank. We own the bank 100%. We're going to run the bank with the same people or different people, but we're going to run the bank. And when times get better, we're going to make a lot of money, and we're going to sell the bank at a tremendous profit. So they did a very, very tiny version of that. But the case could have been made that you do that.
Let's take a little break. I'm going to come back and talk to you about the Republican debates, Republican candidates, the tax plans they're putting up there. What do you think of all your friends in the GOP?